It has 2 low-pitch gabled asphalt shingle roofs, and the east and west elevations have a mix of vertically aligned rectangular windows. The center created by Nettie Grimes Gregory, who was an activist and president of the Salt Lake Community Club, and her husband, William Gregory, constructed this building between 1959 and 1964 with donated labor from Salt Lake City's Black community. It was initially called the Salt Lake Community Center. It was later renamed in honor of Nettie Gregory, who passed away a few months before its dedication in 1964. It was the only community center fully accessible to Black residents. It offered services like tutoring, voter drives, Juneteenth celebrations, computer instruction, and scholarship. The building hosted the NAACP Salt Lake City branch from 1969 to 1997. And while the center closed in 2004 due to declining membership and the construction of newer facilities, recent efforts have been made to reopen the center to provide a needed supportive space for youth. So the Historic Landmark Commission may forward a recommendation on the nomination to the State National Register Review Committee. The next steps would be the State National Register Review Committee will meet on January 16th to review the nomination, and upon approval, nominations are sent to the keeper of the National Register at the National Park Service. Commission members should review the National Register nomination and the review items listed on SHPO's evaluation sheet as a framework to provide comments. As a public hearing, the commission should also allow for public comment on the nomination. If there's any areas of concern by the commission, they can be included in the recommendation that's forwarded to the National Register Review Committee. And on the screen is the evaluation criteria as outlined to aid in the commission in your discussion of this national nomination if you choose to use it. And you're welcome to ask planning staff any questions on the process or the nomination.
Okay, thank you, Nan. Are there any questions at this time for planning staff?
I guess I had just a single question. With the evaluation criteria, was there any expected use or reuse of this building that was submitted, or it was everything that was submitted you've talked about?
Additional information was submitted, but not necessarily on the reuse of the center or the building.
Okay, great. If there's no more questions for Nan, we are going to move on to the public hearing. Community councils, if they're represented here, will have 5 minutes. All other members of the public wishing to speak will have 2 minutes to comment. I would like to open the public hearing, but I don't have any comment cards on it. So is there anyone wishing to speak on this matter? If not, I will close the public hearing. And we can go into executive session. Does anyone have any questions or comments for each other?
I mean, this is not really that relevant, but this is in my neighborhood. It's just a couple blocks from my house, and I've walked by this many times, and I've even stopped. I've taken photographs of it, curious about, I thought the architecture was interesting, but never thought much about it beyond that, except wondering, like, wonder what that building was originally, because it's not readily apparent. And so to learn the fascinating history behind it, I guess it sort of just reminds me that until you look into it, you never really know what kind of history might be in an otherwise, maybe ordinary building. So I think this is fantastic to have it recognized and have that history brought forward.
Yeah, I kind of echo that. I've passed this house many, many times on the way to a certain restaurant just west of here, and it kind of reminds me of what was the Freedom Tower in Miami. That was a favorite place of immigrants from Puerto Rico and Cuba that would go there. They would learn where to live, where jobs were, and be around other people that had immigrated there. It sounds like what happened in the 60s, late 50s and 60s was similar to this. So I'm like you, that I passed by this hundreds of times and never knew that there was a history there, and I look forward to making this something other than what it is now.
Amanda.
I think it's a great example of how a simple building can help to capture a community's history. Looking at the bibliography of the application, it shows how many different sources were accessed and to bring together this report that's a beautiful synopsis that leads to more reading when you dig into it. So kudos to the little buildings that can.
True that.
Yeah, I think we should say yes, and then hopefully they'll apply for tax credits to get the building restored and then using it. And I think this building is actually a great candidate for the new historic marker program that just came out of the mayor's office. So I'm really excited that this research has been done, and hopefully the applicant will consider submitting for the
applicant
marker.
is the state, right? on
I
this?
think it was submitted by Logan Simpson.
Oh, sorry. I read that wrong. Okay. And what would be the protocol if someone wanted to tear it down, since so much in that neighborhood is being bulldozed?
It's not in a local historic district, and it's not a local landmark site. So they would not be subject to our regulations, and there's nothing in the federal and state level that would prohibit that.
I just wanted to hear you say that. Thank you.
I did look at the ownership, right? And it looks like it actually recently, 2023 or 2024, changed ownership to a group that is trying to restore it to kind of a community center type. That's just from what I could see online, and they have a website, right, and which is exciting. And I used to live for a couple of years in the apartment complex just east of this on the other side of the freeway, so I would walk by it all the time too, and it's very exciting. And I don't want to beleaguer the point that, I ditto to what Alan has said too, just to learn the history is fabulous of this, so thank you.
Great. Any other comments, or would anyone like to make a motion? This is just an advisory recommendation, and this will go to Planning Commission next? Or do we just make a recommendation? This is just to the state building board.
Yeah, this will go back to SHPO for their vote, which is January 16th. If that continues, it will go to the National Park Service for a decision.
I'll make a motion. Based on the information listed in the National Register nomination form, the information presented, and the input received, I move that the commission finds that the Nettie Gregory Center appears to meet the National Register criteria, and we recommend listing to the Utah Historic Preservation Office and the National Register Review Committee.
I would second that.
Okay, a motion by Jared and a second by Babs. Babs. I am a yes as well. Mike,
Aye.
Adrian,
Aye.
Amanda,
Aye.
Michael,
Aye.
Emily. Jared
Aye.
and Alan.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously. Great. Thanks, everybody. And moving on to public hearing number 2 for the evening, we have major alterations for Pioneer Park Phase 1 at approximately 350 South, 300 West, aka Pioneer Park. This is PLN HLC 2024-00789 and PLN HLC 2024-00790. And once again, we have Nan Larson presenting on behalf of City Planning.
Great, thank you. So this request comes from Salt Lake City's Public Lands Department, who submitted 2 major alterations applications for the improvement proposed in Pioneer Park. Nancy Monteith, a senior landscape architect with Public Lands, is the applicant for these proposed improvements. The commission tonight is reviewing and making a decision on 2 separate major alteration requests for Pioneer Park. The first is for the ranger station proposed in the park. Staff's recommendation on the ranger station was made after reviewing the open space zoning district, major alteration standards, the Pioneer Park cultural landscape report, and the new construction historic design guidelines for commercial properties. The second major alteration request is for all of the other features proposed as part of these Phase 1 improvements in the park. These features were also weighed against the major alteration standards, the open space zoning district standards, the Pioneer Park CLR, and the commercial site and new construction design guidelines. Both requests were found to meet all applicable standards, and staff is recommending that the commission approve these requests with the conditions listed in the staff report. Now on to the project. Pioneer Park is located west of downtown. It's located both in a national and a local landmark site, and is Salt Lake City's oldest park. The site that the city park encompasses is an entire city block, so 10 acres, and is in the OS zoning district, so open space zoning district. The proposed project is for improvements on the north side of the park, which encompasses 5.7 acres of the 10-acre park. The park improvements are for the new construction of a central pavilion, a dog park shade structure, a ranger building with restrooms, and an office and maintenance rooms in the ranger building, a playground to the west of the park, fencing and landscape and hardscape updates to the park. A cultural landscape report, or a CLR, was conducted on the landmark site in 2021. The commission was presented this report in 2023 and recommended its adoption. Nancy Monteith, who's a city senior landscape architect for the city, was the project manager of the CLR during its creation. The cultural landscape report standardizes guidance for any improvements, maintenance, and operations of the park, while documenting historic resources of the park. The CLR makes recommendations and strategies for the preservation of the historic and cultural aspects of the park. So Nancy and her team will be reviewing the proposed improvements in greater detail. But before that, I wanted to kind of give a brief overview of how the improvements meet the CLR guidelines. The site design that includes the walkway, topography, vegetation, and preservation of mature trees meet the guidelines of the CLR. The applicants have worked closely with the urban forester in preserving mature trees where possible and choosing the correct tree species for the site. The CLR encouraged circulation patterns of the historic park are maintained and the standard is being met. The CLR also recommended that the concrete is the most appropriate hard surface material for the park and recommended that no more than 25% of the park area is hard surfacing. Both of these improvements meet those guidelines. The proposed 3 structures on the park are the Central Pavilion, the Dog Park Shade Structure, and the Ranger Building. All 3 structures meet the CLR guidelines, including keeping the scale small of each of these structures with limited visual impact. And they're also clearly designed as newly constructed structures. All structures also meet the transparency guidelines recommended in the CLR. Similar to these 3 structures, the proposed playground and misting feature will also be consistent with the guidelines, maintaining a limited visual impact, small scale, and it as designed as a product of its own time. The playground will be located to the west of the ranger station, and the misting or water feature's exact location hasn't been determined at the time that this presentation and staff report was finalized. The misting feature final design and location will be decided by the Salt Lake City Arts Council. As a condition of approval to the major alteration, staff is recommending that the commission delegate approval of the final design and location of the misting feature to staff, who will approve the final design decided by the Arts Council. I also wanted to give a brief overview of the work session that this commission held last year, at which the commission recommended certain modifications to the improvements before the designs were finalized. And the applicant will also review these changes in greater detail. Planning staff found greater compliance to the historic design guidelines and CLR recommendations with the updates of the additional texture on the Ranger Building on all 4 facades, the awning feature now extending to all 4 facades of the building, and the clear story perforated metal screening above restrooms that allows for passive ventilation, natural light, and non-visual connection to the exterior. The commission also recommended a greater connection to the park's history is made with the proposed improvements. The applicant updated their proposal, which now includes an interpretive historic walk with informational signs that describe certain periods of the park's history. The historic walk will extend through promenade gardens, which depict aspects of the region's natural landscape. And the recommendation. Planning staff is recommending that the Historic Landmark Commission approve the 2 major alterations with the respective conditions listed in the staff report. And if there's any questions or comments for me before the applicant makes their presentation.
How many trees are going to be removed?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I'm sure it was in the application, though. I think that's a question you could ask the applicant, and they would know off the top of their head.
I do have a question, and I'm assuming that the layout farmers market that happens there, that will still be accommodated around the facilities that are proposed?
Yes, and they're improving the farmers market as well.
Okay.
Yes.
A few months ago, we had a presentation on similar proposal for the park. And the ranger station was essentially the same, but the other features are very different. Is this in addition to what we were presented earlier, or is this in place of what was presented earlier?
Was this during the August 1st work session meeting?
Yeah.
I don't think they showed us the misting fountain area.
Yeah, the misting fountain, no, that's it. Nothing else that I see here was included except for the ranger station. But there was supposed to be sort of a covered pavilion or something along the west.
It is.
So that's what that is.
So
I thought that was on the west side. I'm not sure what view this is, what direction this is
So
looking.
this is a view that's looking north, and it might be helpful if the applicant makes their presentation where they get into more of these details, because I know that Nancy will be going over these things, and I'm trying to save a little bit of time since their presentation might run a little bit long. This is the same plan that the commission heard during the work session meeting on August 1st of last year.
Okay. So
The
this
only
is just,
addition is the dog park shade structure. And then on this screen, there's the 6 pickleball
okay.
courts and the basketball court
so
that's
this is
highlighted
just
in
like
red.
an extension,
It's an
additional
extension, yes.
of what we saw before. Okay, that's what I understand. If this was like a different plan or if this was just adding on to the plan.
Yeah, they're kind of building off of our comments from the work
Okay.
session. Yeah.
As I recall, there was a fair amount of questions concerning the simplicity of the design for the ranger station and the restroom building, and that's been addressed. And there were some questions concerning the pavilion itself, just how the rendering looked and how thin it was. And I'm not saying anything here. I would suspect that that's going to be presented to staff when it's further designed.
So the design that's approved by the commission here is the design that would receive a certificate of appropriateness from staff. So this is the decision-making body on this. It will not return unless the commission chooses to table the item.
But there will be more detail.
There will be
provided
more detail that the
shortly.
applicant
Yeah.
presents.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess I didn't completely understand that. So they're asking for approval for this plan now, where before they were asking for feedback, but now this is approval, and any further approval will be handled by staff. Any further approval needed. Like
So
you
the
men-
decision
You
on,
mentioned the misting area. Final approval for that will come from staff, not from.
We're reviewing this as a major alterate.
correct.
It's a little bit confusing because it is the city, so, you know, Nan's presenting as city planning, but then we'll also have a different department of the city about to do their presentation as if they're the
But
applicant.
this isn't going to come before us again. This is our approval for the major alterations.
Correct.
This is the public hearing for the 2 major alterations. The August 1st work session meeting was for the commission's recommendations on the finalization of the plans. So this is the presentation of the final plans to the commission, and you would have the opportunity tonight to make that decision if you so choose.
I'm confused on what the 2 major alterations are.
Let me go back to that slide.
The fountain, playground, and the ranger station?
So the first major alteration is for the ranger station. The second major alteration is for all other features on the in the park that are proposed in the park. So that would include the central pavilion, the dog park and shade structure, playground, the misting feature, pickleball courts, the basketball court. The only reason why there's the 2 conditions that are attached is because the Salt Lake City Arts Council is still deciding on the misting feature, which will be the art feature in the park. And then the final minor modifications that the applicant might make. If there's anything major, it will return back to the Historic Landmark Commission for a decision.
Which is a pretty standard condition
Yes.
that we normally attach to approvals. So, should we bring the applicant up for their
Before we do that, I just want to state something for the record. So, Ann Mooney of Sperano Mooney Architecture is my colleague at the University of Utah School of Architecture. If no one has any objection, I'm happy to speak on this. If not, I can recuse myself. Okay.
I do not have any problem with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for being honest. It's always refreshing in this world.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Nancy Monteith, Senior Landscape Architect with Public Lands. Thank you for having us here tonight. I'll start first with the two clarifications. The misting feature is a current feature in the park that Jamie will review in the design. What the Arts Council has a commission to add art to the park, and that is what is still outstanding. The Arts Council goes through, has a board, and selects an artwork that will be placed in the park. For Salt Lake City's only park, first park and only downtown park, it has not had art at all until today. So we are excited about that. So we're here. This is our fourth time that we've come to the Historic Landmarks Commission, and I think Nan did a really good job sharing with you the steps that we've gone through. We briefed the Historic Landmarks Commission on the Cultural Landscape Report in 2022, and that informed the vision plan. We came back with the vision plan, which was a community-informed planning exercise to decide what the goals of the park were and what the priority improvements should be. Again, in August, we were most recently here in August. Next slide. One of the first steps we did, and Nan talked, it gave an overview of what a cultural landscape report is. It is also the standard by which the National Park Service has established for managing historic sites. And so the process of a cultural landscape report is to document the existing conditions of the site, to understand the historic periods, and tie the site development and changes over time to those historic periods, identify the periods of historic significance, and create management recommendations to preserve for the periods of historic significance. This report is on the preservation website, and it is richly detailed and full of information if you want to dig deeper into that. Next slide. After that, we did a community visioning plan, and that was to identify the high priority recreation elements and activities that the community would like to see. Downtown is growing dramatically, and with this being our only downtown park, and with downtown having the least amount of green space per resident of all the city, it's important that it be a thriving, active place for every day and the big day. The goals are developing this green oasis in the heart of the city. It should be welcoming for everyone. We need to balance those regional and neighborhood needs. It should be a model for urban ecology, and it should be a safe and well-maintained space. As we shift to the next slide, you'll see that some of the forms that you see on the site have shifted, and that was precisely to protect as many of the existing trees as possible.
Hi, I'm Jamie Vogel, Principal and Landscape Architect Design Workshop. We're the prime design consultant working with Nate King at Sperona Mooney on this project. So building upon what Nan talked about and also what Nancy just mentioned, I'm just going to walk you briefly through this so it's kind of clear on kind of these components that I think gets to your question about what was the addition, because we were fortunate enough to get additional funding to be able to fully visualize the vision plan. So in addition to the pavilion, which is number 4, we've got the ranger station, which is number 5 to the west of that, and then the dog park shade structure, which is to the east. That's kind of the east-west axis. The main kind of spine that we talked about, which will be really set up for events and food trucks during farmers markets and other events, is number 1. So it's kind of the promenade. We'll talk a little bit about the history that Nan mentioned here shortly, which is number 3, and kind of this history walk in the promenade garden. And that misting feature, the primary one is, I think, identified really on the axis as you come in across 300 South. So we have kind of identified where that goes. Still working through some of those sort of constructability issues. But those are kind of that major piece there. As we go to All Ages Playground, which is directly west of the Ranger Pavilion. That was kind of what you saw last time, and what we've added since then is the dog park to the east of the pavilion, which is about the same size as the current one, but upgraded with shade and a better surfacing. Number 7, which is the 6 pickleball courts, is based on USA pickleball regulation sizes. We'll have sport court lighting, and then the basketball court will kind of be replaced or be in the place of where the existing dog park is, which is to the east on number 8, and will also be lit. So there are kind of 4 recommendations in the CLR that I'm just going to walk you through just to kind of give you a little bit more breakdown, which is topography, circulation, vegetation, and then alteration. So topography, it's a relatively flat site, sloping from the northeast corner to the west. We're really not changing that drainage pattern and not going over that 3-foot height limitation that in the CLR. Really thinking if there's any grade changes, really it's about sort of drainage and also thinking about the program uses. The circulation, we're maintaining the circular chat path, or the perimeter path, concrete path, as well as the chat gravel, which is the perimeter blue and the gray. And then as we move into the park, concrete is the predominant, the predominant hardscape, certainly because it's going to be used for maintenance vehicles and life safety vehicles that need to access the park. So that's really going to be a 10-foot wide minimum path, all concrete. And the promenade, which is the curved area north of the pavilion, sort of some exposed aggregate concrete. The blue is a soft chat gravel material that will be bound by concrete on the edges, and also is where that kind of historical markers are. Poured in place safety surfacing for the playground. The dog park has a combination of a chat gravel and then a small area of synthetic turf. We've got a low energy dog area and a high energy dog area. And then the pickleball courts and the basketball court would be post-tension concrete with sport surfacing on top of that. As Nan mentioned, we are not exceeding the 25% maximum impervious area. Inside of the first phase, we're a little bit over that, but park-wide, we're at 22.5%, so we're under that 25% area. The question about how many trees we're taking out, we've got 7 trees that we're taking out in the park based on working with Rick Nelson at Forestry, based on species as well as condition of those. The trees along 300 South are also part of that issue because there have been some that have been removed, and a lot of the lindens are struggling. So we're trying to rehabilitate the soil and add more trees in. So we're going to have about 128 additional trees, or 124 additional trees, which is about 40% more than what there is today. We've done a human comfort study to understand where that wants to be, and thinking about how we're going to lower that temperature and also create diversity with the species. So working with Rick and his team to maximize that in those areas. The understory, currently everything is predominantly grass, so what you'll see in these areas, the green is still going to maintain grass. The central athletic field will remain as grass. The red and the purple areas are shrub red materials, and that will be a combination of shrubs, perennials, and grasses, ornamental grasses. As we're going through the site certification process, there's a balance between water use, so we're trying to be conscious of that and being able to reduce that water usage by introducing shrub material and working with Nancy and the public lands team from operations side and event side, working to maintain usability for farmers market and other events in the park. The alterations related to furnishings and fencing, there's very limited seating and bike racks and kind of site furnishings in the park, so we're adding those in. So a combination of backless benches. The fencing that will be around the playground and around the dog park will be 4 foot tall. You'll see some of the examples in some renderings here shortly. It's a lower fence, metal. The playground area does not have gates, but the dog park does. And then around the sport court areas, there is going to be chain link to satisfy for that program. So those will be taller than that 4 feet based on that use.
And I'm Nate King. I'm with Sperona Mooney Architecture. I'll speak to the architectural elements. As was mentioned by Nan, the architecture is broken up into 2 separate case numbers, which the first that I'll speak to being associated to the large central pavilion and the smaller dog park shade structure located on the east side of the park. So site plan, actually go back to, the architectural elements are oriented along an east-west axis that is bordered by by the north walkway of the central quad. The undulating form creates gestures to each side of the pavilion, with one central facing the field and two to the north for smaller events. We can go to, skip this one. Okay, quickly on materiality. The pavilion and dog park shade structural elements are comprised of HSS tube steel framing proposed to receive a high performance paint coating. The paint finish allows ease of maintenance, tamper resistance in the event of vandalism. 16 by 16 columns and 16 by 16 girder, so they're pretty heavy gauge column and girder, proposed to receive a darker gray paint, and the overhead undulating joists and roofing, a lighter finish. So the design intent is really for this curvilinear element to appear set delicately on this heavier kind of formal base. Next slide. So the Ranger building is the third architectural element, and really this building will efficiently serve multiple functions for the park. It incorporates 5 restrooms, offices for park rangers that will function as their new central hub, as well as a central maintenance and storage space for the park. We conducted a contextual analysis and were able to glean some key takeaways from the surrounding context. The use of highly textural materials, architecture incorporates a top, middle, and bottom. There's a vertical emphasis associated to the facades in this neighborhood, and also we observed a subtle use of color throughout. We also reviewed Chapter 13 design guidelines. Nan went through some of these as well, but we kind of pulled some key elements within the design guidelines: variations in material, texture, patterns, color. It notes flat roof forms are appropriate, and this also 13.13, this came up again, a base, a middle, and a top being suggested. And the Cultural Landscape Report really talks about not trying to reconstruct or otherwise recreate structures that no longer exist, but really creating something that's a record of its time, place, and use. I think most importantly, taking your feedback, Commission's feedback from the work session on August 1st and how we addressed your comments and concerns. The most significant discussion item that we had in August were the large unarticulated blank walls that were previously presented, was talked about at length. So we've addressed this now by proposing a highly textural cast-in-place concrete that will be achieved by a fluted profile using a form liner material. So the lower 2'10" of the structure will include a larger scale texture that will continue around the perimeter and comprise the base of the building. The approximately 8 feet above that will incorporate the same texture but at a smaller scale to create the middle band. And the top element is created by an overhead canopy comprised of painted HSS tube steel that will create, and you can see in the image here, create dynamic light shadow patterning on the facade. So getting back to this kind of base, middle, top, that was something we observed not only in the neighborhood, the design guidelines, but also adding additional texture and articulation to the facade. This is looking at the north and east facades that incorporates the same strategies. One thing to note, and Nan touched on this, there's perforated metal banding that will include the same fluted profile as the concrete. It incorporates the subtle color, and in case of the restrooms, provides passive ventilation. Quickly on floor plan, the building is 36 by 30. This illustrates the program. You can see in the southeast corner is the Ranger Hub, kiosk, southwest maintenance storage, and 5 restrooms on the north, including 1 ADA stall. Elevations, it's 12 foot 6 inches to the top of parapet. You can see the banding continues around the building, and one thing, the use of color on the north adjacent to the restrooms, we added this small image. The color was inspired by the Rio Grande signage from this neighborhood. Walk through a couple of perspectives. The top left view, this is really kind of standing adjacent to the pavilion looking to the west towards the Ranger building. Top right view, is the south and west facades, which previously included these large blank walls. You can now see the texture achieved on these elevations, both from the fluted concrete and the light and shadow that is cast by the overhead plane. Top left is perhaps a little better perspective, illustrating the north and east facades of the Ranger building. Bottom left illustrates proximity between the playground, play area, and the restroom building, which was an important request by city. There was one thing to address. There was a comment during the work session that perhaps the Ranger building could incorporate or reference the history of the park in some way. We explored this, but felt the history piece needed to be a little more prominent of an element. So Jamie's going to talk a little bit about how we're addressing the history of the park.
Thanks, Nate. Just south of the promenade, north of the pavilion, we've got this sort of promenade garden, which is going to have some existing trees. And so this idea of using the V1 wayfinding signage, which is an 18 by 24 wayfinding signing, building upon the 6 periods in the cultural landscapes report and extracting kind of the main points that talk about the significance to the city, to the region, and making sure that we're highlighting those components. This is intended to be sort of an outdoor, it's not intended to be an outdoor museum, but it is intended to highlight some of those major components that highlight what the history was. And then the last couple of slides here just kind of show in context how this all kind of comes together. So this view is from the south, or from the west side looking northeast, pickleball courts in the foreground, ranger station and playground to the left, and then the pavilion and that relationship. And in the background behind some proposed trees is the dog park pavilion. Swinging around to the northeast corner, you can see the low energy area for dogs and a high energy area with the shade structure in there. Soft service, and then how that relates back to the pavilion and the open lawn area. And then a little bit larger view of the relationship to the playground, the west edge of the Ranger building, and the pavilion.
And here we are kind of zooming out again, looking at the whole site. And I want to emphasize that we strove to integrate the new recreation elements and features into this landmark site, and to be able to respect and honor that this space has always been a green space and a public square in the heart of downtown. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant at this time?
I do. I have a question or two. Currently, there are flagpoles in the park, and in my comings and goings through the park, that is like the one focal point that exists in the park. The rest of the park currently seems sort of random and disorganized. Are those flagpoles staying? Okay, I couldn't see them.
Yeah.
So they are staying.
Yes.
I'm not even sure if they're old enough to be considered historic, but I've always liked them because they were some kind of sort of focal point. So
yes, they are staying. They're in the kind of midpoint of the lawn. They're in that kind of oval area. We just didn't represent those, but yes, they are staying.
Okay. I have to say, I like what I'm seeing. I also liked your response to the feedback on the ranger station. I remember those discussions, and I like how you've responded to the feedback we gave on that.
I would disagree about that. I want to talk about the bathrooms.
I think that you should.
Yeah. And I'll jump in there. I've lived and worked in this neighborhood within a block of this park for 20 years, more than 20 years. It is the closest green space. And it is not a park for children because it's frightening, the clientele that is in the park. So having a big water feature is going to attract, I'm not sure, but when I Google, they tend to become public baths for the homeless rather than for children. So having that feature there may or may not accomplish what y'all are hoping, that children will run to this park and play in this park. There's also no big shade structures over that, and in the summer when we're reaching 110 to 115, no one would want to play in that park, in that water feature area, other than to get some quick relief from the heat. So I'm concerned about that. And the security, we have a ranger. Is there just a ranger on duty?
So there are teams of rangers. We have a whole ranger program, and 3 to 5, I believe, and they have a range. They each have a district, and there are home bases in each district, and Pioneer Park will be the home base for the ranger group in this area of downtown.
So how many people from, like, say, 9 to 5 would be on duty in Pioneer Park?
I am not completely familiar
A team or
with
one person?
They always travel in teams.
Okay. Well, good. I also was researching several different cities about the public bathrooms, and have you used the public bathroom that we have here in Salt Lake?
Which one?
We only have one.
There's some in Liberty, there's some
Right down here in this neighborhood. We only have one. Have you been down there? It was a huge issue when I was chair of the Downtown Merchants Association of putting in the one bathroom that people could access down there. And they spent a lot of time researching what kind of bathroom should go in down there, because a bathroom attracts drugs and nefarious things that are going on. I didn't see any change in the bathrooms here. They just look like stalls that people can go in and be private. The one public bathroom down there is a design they use, I think in Seattle, where you can see up to people's knees if there's one person in there or more than one person in there. And this has not changed for me. This is a frightening experience. If I wanted to go to the bathroom over there, I have no idea what would be happening there. If the one ranger isn't there or the ranger team isn't there of what's going on down there. So I can't support that design at all with the bathrooms.
And these recommendations that the commission had made during the August work session meeting, there was a long discussion with Nancy and her team about these concerns that you had with bathing in the water fountain at the ranger station. And this was addressed with a screen that is proposed where they have the washing basin, and my understanding is that would be closed during outside of park hours by the rangers. There was also a discussion about, because I remember you making this comment during the work session meeting, about keeping the restroom stall open on the bottom, and there was some security concerns.
I'm so aware of this. I've been on more than a dozen meetings about Pioneer Park in my 20 years down here, and it's a frightening bathroom to be used, but it is the only one that the unsheltered down there can use, and it's a total mess all of the time. And we have the yellow jackets that come around and clean and pick up, but here we're adding 4, and to me it just looks like ready for drug, sex, and rock and roll in there, and it's kind of frightening. The other things that I was Googling about public bathrooms is how badly around the country they are kept clean and functioning, and so wondering about the staff there. Are the rangers in charge of cleaning, or is there a whole different cleaning crew? It can be very nasty, and there can be a lot of graffiti in there as well. So I am totally against this design for these bathrooms. Otherwise, sure, the city's going to go on with this no matter what. It's a little scary to think about what can happen there and what has happened there, and we'll just have to see.
Any other questions at this time? Let's keep it to questions, and then discuss when we're in executive session too.
It's a comment and a question. And I agree with you, Babs. I think there's really 2 issues. There's an architectural issue that's in front of us, but then there's a management issue that's not in your purview that needs to very much be addressed. Now, I also see that the design, thinking back on how the park is used for farmers market, because I think during farmers market, everything here, because there's a critical mass of people, numbers of people, that it kind of takes care of itself. In between those kinds of events, everything that Bab was saying is problematic. Now, the question that I had was in the design, and given, and I'm happy to see that there's pickleball courts, and I was just checking to make sure I was on firm ground. For a pickleball tournament, there's like 16 courts minimum, and just given how popular pickleball has been, and you know, we're responsible for doing some pickleball courts across the country right now, and there's a lot of them. Was there any thinking that the numbers of pickleball courts would be increased, so that would be yet another kind of activity like the farmers market, you know, that would be at that critical mass? Because I'm just asking if that ever came up in the discussions with the city.
Yeah, when we've talked to the pickleball community, their desire is to have a minimum of 6, because you can have small-scale tournaments, and we have a 6-court pickleball complex at Fairmont, and it is busy all day long. And there is enough courts, and the play is fast enough, and players rotate through, so anyone can come and quickly enter a series of games.
Understood.
Proven to be very
for
popular.
a pickleball tournament, it's 16 is kind of the minimum, which would push your 6 to, you would need 3 of those somehow. That's all I was asking.
Well, we are trying to maintain the impermeability to be under 25%, and then we also want to preserve the central field for play. So at this time, I think we can explore adding more courts in the future.
Okay.
So how much of the park will be fenced after these improvements?
We have a fence around the pickleball, and then the fence around the basketball, a fence around the playground, and then a fence around the off-leash dog area. And the two, for the playground and the off-leash area, it's 4 feet tall. And around the 2 active recreation features, they are kind of standard best practices. So some areas are 10.
On the ends of the courts, they're 10, and they step down to 4, similar to what's in Liberty and Fairmont. But there's not a perimeter fence around the park, if that's what you're asking. There's component.
The whole thing will be fenced, and then with fences and fences and fences. Oh, no, okay, so just, no. So I have questions about the rangers. Do these rangers provide any kind of social services, or are they security guards, or what is the purpose of the ranger? What does that mean?
So the ranger program is to create a welcoming atmosphere. So they, and it's more, I would say, like a national park ranger, but they are not commissioned officers. They do work closely with the police department and other social services, but they have a niche to be sort of welcoming representatives of public lands in our public spaces and to provide that presence. They do interpretation. They also they do interface with the unsheltered population and try to connect them with services. They don't themselves offer the services. Does that answer your question?
If the place could use some case management, and I wondered if that was part of their role. No.
They're going to end up as cops, period.
Yeah, no one needs an interpretive ranger. I feel like that's ridiculous in the 10-acre square.
But the ranger program already exists. It's been relatively
Yeah.
successful.
Park doesn't need interpretive. I feel like that's.
I had a comment and a quick question. I did want to say thank you for incorporating our feedback about the history. When I saw the promenade, I was very happy to see that. I also appreciate the location that you chose, because people walk into the park from that area, so everyone's essentially going to have a touch point with those historical signs. So from your presentation, what I understand is that the history that you're going to be using on those signs come from the CLR, correct? Once there's like a draft of those 6 signs, are you going to show them to the city staff for approval? Okay, great, thank you.
I meant to also thank you for that, because I remember both Adrian and I saying, this is a historic site, and yet there's nothing here that tells us about that. And so incorporating that, and I think it and the location, the way that it's been done, looks really nice. So I was really pleased about that too.
My quick comment is, I think the placement of the dog park is great, right? Most of the residents, like we walk our dog around the block right there from Pierpont over to the park. I think that's much closer to where the people with dogs are, right? So I think that's fabulous. And, I think having a high and low energy dog areas is great. I don't know of any park that has kind of a big dog, small dog separation, and a lot of small dog owners won't go to some of those parks, and so I think you've been very thoughtful about that. So those are my comments, and I like Adrian, appreciate all the incorporation of our comments. Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? If not,
Is any of this designed to move the homeless out of that area? Any of this? I mean, it seems like a lot of hardscaping, and that some of these improvements are engineered to make the area less hospitable to our urban wildlife.
I think our public spaces should be welcoming to anyone who is appropriately using them. And the idea is that we bring a lot of activities to the park to add more vibrancy, so everyone is welcome and people are more comfortable being in that public space.
great. With that, I'm going to thank you. You can sit down for now. I'm going to open the public hearing. I have one card, so we'll start with that. Just as a reminder, the public has the opportunity for 2 minutes to speak if you would like, and we're going to start with Cindy Cromer.
I'll start with the positives. I'm thrilled that the city is not proposing hostile landscaping as it is in Toffer Park. As my neighbor who has had both knees replaced says, hostile landscaping is hostile to everyone. Secondly, I'm enthusiastic about the bilingual signs for the history of the site, which you have referenced in your comments. Now for the stuff that only Cindy Cromer would say. I lost much of my enthusiasm for the makeover of Pioneer Park when the commission approved the removal of over 50 trees to accommodate the field. And since that decision, I view the design of the park as driven by purposes that we have decided to install in it for our current enjoyment, and of course to displace uses that we don't want to occur there. So the meandering pathways, I don't see these as consistent with what we know about the history of travel through the space, through the site. You know, there's this huge thing in landscape design about formal versus informal. It's been going on for a very long time. The colored walkways, I don't have any objection to the colored surfaces in the children's area, but much of the drawing, much of the renderings suggest that other surfaces are colored, and I don't think that's appropriate. It look like there's zones of color. So the color is fine on the walkways in the children's playground, but otherwise I think it should just be plain, historic-looking concrete. The misting feature you've talked about, it needs to be operated by users like the feature that's in Imperial Park so that the water is not being wasted when no one is present. And there was a discussion about potential murals previously, and that's an excuse from my perspective to use poor quality building materials and avoid a focus on design. I'm very tired of murals. So the makeover of our parks are not attending to potential increased costs of maintenance such as associated with the extensive drought-tolerant plantings proposed here, and some of those plants will require deadheading or they will look quite shabby. So the budget for maintenance in our parks is not increasing, and across the board, the city is proposing some very elaborate changes that have maintenance costs associated with them, and we don't have money to maintain these new designs. So those are my grumpy comments. I've been in a bad humor ever since the 53 trees were removed.
Thank you, Cindy. I have no more cards. Is there anyone else kind of in the audience who wishes to speak? Are there any emails that we should discuss on the record? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to close the public hearing and we're going to go into executive session. Well, I guess I'll give a chance for a rebuttal to any of the public comments that the applicant might want to make. Okay, hearing none. We'll move it into the executive session, which is just for the commissioners to discuss. And yeah, is there anyone who wishes to start us off? Emily.
I feel like the improvements to Pioneer Park in an effort to displace the homeless population have come at the expense of the rest of the city. I feel like historically speaking, Pioneer Park did a great job containing some of these social ills. And I feel like that's this park's job. And it does this job so that every other park doesn't have to. And that historically is what the use of this park is, and that is doing an important job for everyone who lives in this town.
Any thoughts on the design, architecture standards, design standards for new construction?
I think what I said before is that there's an architectural component and a management component. I think what the architects have done, responds to what they were asked to do. I think the splash pond is tricky. It can work famously if parents feel safe. That's not, that they just have to feel safe, otherwise it'll be empty. The dog park with all the residences that are currently to the north and others that are being built to the west, I think that's going to be heavily, heavily used. The pavilion, being a nice respite spot, I think that'll be used. Pickleball, I would wish that there could be more of them because of the critical nature of having tournaments there and bringing another set of people, that would be using it on weekends and such. It's not like the Kevin Costner movie where you build it and they will come. Mm-hmm. This really needs to be managed very, very well. Otherwise, it will be as successful as the soccer fields that were built a few years back. So there's two components to that. I do think that the architects, especially with the Ranger building, very much paid attention to everything that we said back in August concerning the fenestration and the materials, and they are what they are, and they're appropriate.
Can I ask you a question, Mike, about critical mass, like population question? Do you feel like that has to happen at the scale of the whole park, or can it happen at smaller scales, like say just around the 6 pickleball courts, or just around the pavilion, or just around the dog park? Like, do you feel like those smaller areas within the park can also develop a sense of safety and a sense of critical mass? Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, it's called the ranger station, so what I'm assuming there's one or two people, especially where there's a lot of kids involved, are just going to be walking around and watching and making certain that things are safe there, and that there's a fairly constant presence, around the park. So yeah, I think honestly, if the management of the park, happens appropriately, then I think there's a good chance that it's going to be as successful as we all hope it to be.
I'm wondering about the pickleball as well. Up in my neighborhood where they have pickleball, there's seating areas and there's shaded areas, and there doesn't appear to be any of that on this design. Did you see that?
Mm-hmm.
I do think that the trees, there might not be shading structures around the misting structure of the pickleball, but the trees are going to do a really good job there as well. I mean, obviously, time of day matters, but I think the trees are a great benefit to us there too.
A lot of the people at Fairmont have been conditioned to just bring their own camp chair when they wait for a court.
Well, when you think about the future, and this is an important, design and a different change, we might want to think about the future. If you wanted to have smaller tournaments, then you probably have maybe some bleachers there as well. It's kind of like people that don't use the park are designing the park. I work down here, live down here forever. You do not see children in this park. Parents are afraid to take their children to this park. They're afraid to take their children to this neighborhood. That is a given. And when I'm selling properties down in this neighborhood, I can tell you that if people couple up and have a child, they move out of the neighborhood because they don't feel safe walking their baby around this neighborhood. And so we're going to say, no, we're building this whole children's area for you. Come down here. It's going to be safe. What's going to look safe to them? This is just an ongoing, this has been going on for decades, and it really hasn't changed. One of the issues about downtown, for example, is we don't have any daycare. We have one daycare that Recursion set up in the Gateway, which is great for people that want to work and have daycare. That's been the only pro-children thing that's happened down there in years. So let's put in a water park, and I just drove by the water park that's been closed for years on the west side, which is now being bulldozed and changed. But it's interesting, if you've driven down there, now the unsheltered have taken their RVs and parked all the way down that street and all the way over here. They won't be doing it here because of the state highway, but it's just it's a really unique neighborhood demographically, and it's hard to promote it for the children. They all feel great coming down to the farmer's market in the summer because there's so much presence of people down there and security and what have you. The rest of the time, that park is a ghost town.
Mm-hmm.
The optimist in me sees this as an opportunity for revitalization and essentially rebranding. Like I said, that's the optimism in me. I think if there is proper staffing there, then it could be a safe place.
I guess I feel the same way, like this could be a way of revitalizing the park. I think it's going to require, Babs talked about the restrooms. You go to Liberty Park and they now just have porta potties because the actual built restrooms that they built however many years ago, they just keep locked all the time. They just are non-functional. And that's because the city has not been able to deal with the problem of the unsheltered population. And unless the city can do that, then we're always going to have these problems. And the only way to prevent it is saying, well, we're just not going to have restrooms, and that is a disservice to everybody. And so there are broader problems that need to be addressed. I like the general design. I hear what you're saying about the children, Babs. It's like you just don't see kids, and it's partly because people are afraid to take their kids there, but it's partly because people who have kids do not live in this neighborhood. It is not built for families. But the other thing that I want to say, and this is sort of a philosophical question that I ask about this, because I struggle a little bit, like, how do we look at this historically? There, besides the tree canopy and the grass, there is nothing historic here. I mean, that is all there is there this kind of group of trees, and that's historic, and having some grass, that's historic. There are no other historic features in the park. And even though the park has been around for 150 years.
But can I respond to that a little bit? So that was the purpose of the cultural landscape report, though, which the design has drawn upon extensively. And in the cultural landscape report, there are distillations of all of the historic elements that may not exist anymore, but may still be present in some senses. And
Yeah, I understand that, but I guess what I'm saying is, so what is the history of the park? Just a cycle of wiping it clean every 30 years, and is that the history? And so we just
That's what it is to me, yeah.
that we just continue this history, or will anything that might be built now, will it still be standing in 50 years so the Landmark Commission could say, oh, we actually have a historic element that is worthy of preservation? If you go to Liberty Park, throughout the park, you find the elements that are distinctly Liberty Park that have survived over the years, and you can say, here's a piece of history that we can save. And Pioneer Park, there just isn't anything there. And I'm like, well, are we just perpetuating that? Is that what we want to do? Or is this design, does it include anything that will be worth preserving in 50 years? Or have we just said this park is just going to get wiped clean every 30 or 40 years and redone in the latest whatever is going on in parks at that time? Because Pioneer Park doesn't really have much history to me, and you can't go back and create history that's gone, and yet are we just continue with this sort of disposable park that we just redo I don't know.
I mean, I think there's some merits to having a park that changes over time to different recreational desires and needs. They probably wouldn't have built a dog park here 30 years ago, let alone 100 years ago.
Absolutely.
It just would have been,
if there were something in the park that were iconic, that everybody would recognize as Pioneer Park.
When the train was there, everybody recognized.
Yeah, the train was sort of, and then it got
But
taken
also,
out.
brilliant what you just said. I totally agree. Here's the interesting part for how I see it, living down that area for so long, is in the winter, nothing. None of this is for the winter. Let's, hope for the summer, and they hope that hopefully the summers don't get so damn hot that no one wants to go down there. But in the wintertime, there's nothing. And one of the charrettes years ago I sat in on was take the middle section and lay down a giant concrete slab so that in the wintertime you can have ice skating and hockey, and in the summertime you can have rollerblading, when people compete.
Like a skate park or?
Roller derby.
Roller derby.
Oh.
Yeah, so in the summertime, and then you'd have some badass women down there watching the park. But as you see, it's just, we'll hope we'll get some soccer games in there. But there is nada in there in the wintertime.
Well, you don't need concrete to put ice rinks in there.
Well,
Trust me.
but you need concrete.
That would be great for ice rinks.
You need
if
concrete.
it ever gets that cold again.
Yeah, but you need concrete for roller derby.
Yeah, you do.
And that would be activity year-round, but there's no activity in this. This is very short-sighted, and every plan I see is that way. Nothing in the winter.
So we're sitting here looking at this screen with a central pavilion in the very center of a large open space with a very distinctive shape and form and roof structure. And I don't know how much more iconic it gets than that.
I agree. Absolutely.
While
Wholeheartedly.
maintaining the same function as a park, I don't know how much more iconic we're going to get.
That pavilion is going to be that building in 50 years.
It could.
It is. It's simple, it's elegant, it's low, it's architecturally, it's great.
We've chopped down trees to put a metal shade structure in, right? That just doesn't make good sense. And this is all lipstick on a pig designed to make it less hospitable to other citizens of this country. I mean, homeless people are people too. And if we don't allow them to be somewhere, they'll be everywhere. And that's a problem that we are experiencing right now.
But the construction on the pavilion isn't itself making homeless people leave the park. If anything, it'll provide some shelter during a rainy day, right?
Yeah, to me, it's conspicuously inhospitable. And cementy and temporary. And a dog park is an open toilet. I'm a no.
I have mixed feelings. I have mixed feelings about it. I like the concept. I like the look, and yet it's such a complex. It's a complex neighborhood with a lot of complex issues at work, a complex history of a park that has not worked well for a lot of purposes people would like a park to work for, and yet has provided a home, sort of a place where people can, who don't have another place to go, can go. So it's a messy, complex space to try to deal with. And I think this is a good proposal. Is this the perfect proposal? This discussion suggests it's not. Is there a better proposal to be had? I don't know.
Well, we have to consider
does
the
it meet the
proposal that's in
standards of
front
the
us.
ordinance?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, we're trying to determine if this proposal that we're looking at right now meets our standards. And if we don't think it does, we need to come up with some findings of fact for how it does not. So that's kind of where we're at right now. But
I think-
Amanda?
You know,
I'll be in the minority here. I feel like, for the most part, I like the proposal, and it's based on the Cultural Landscape Report, which is critical to informing the history and the detail I've seen that's gone into this since I've been following this. It's been a couple years now, right? I think they've done a remarkable job because I'm dating myself a little bit, but back in the 90s when I was patrolling Pioneer Park as a police officer, it was a drug bust, just wherever, if you needed some stats on your sheet, you could get onto Pioneer Park. It was guaranteed reports. When I was told that the farmer's market had moved to Pioneer Park, I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked that.
And they still want to move,
That there was the ability to use Pioneer Park for the community, which it was not at the time. And so having seen the farmer's market come in and now to see this, I think it's a move in the right direction. I think because the community was asked for their input, they may not live in the area, so maybe it's everyone else who's talking about your neighborhood, Babs. But it didn't feel like an arbitrary decision for this plan. It seemed like it was based on a lot of thought and feedback. And so, will the kids use the splash pad? I don't know, but what if they don't? So what? It's got a dog park, it's got pickleball courts, it's got open space, and it feels like it's a good plan to serve the community for the foreseeable future. And in 30 years, when the community says we don't want pickleball courts because no one plays pickleball anymore, then we'll put in someone else. We'll go back to the roller derby, and it'll be a much safer place because of the clientele who are supporting the roller derby tournaments.
But one of the reasons for saying that is it gives eyes on the park at all times when it's used year-round. Have you been to Mill Creek lately? Have you seen what the hell Mill Creek City has done? It's a miracle of who the hell, that old little ratty old area, and now fabulous for ice skating, and they even designed it really cleverly. You have food trucks in there, you have farmers market in there, you have creators in there. The food truck area is fabulous. There's nothing in this park for that. It is like, let's drop this in over here, and yeah, some people will come, we hope.
I mean, I think it's a little more well thought out than that, first of all, but this isn't, that we didn't have a blank slate here. This wasn't a tabula rasa, or that we could just kind of decide that, hey, let's build ice rinks, because we have a half acre, I don't know, an acre, however big that is in Mill Creek. This is an old park. It's an old piece of land. We only have so many resources to build on it. And I think it's a good plan. Yeah, I don't know if it's the best plan. I don't know what the best plan is.
I agree with Amanda. I think it is. I think it kind of moves the ball towards what this park could be. And that's sort of what has happened. I guess I feel like that's what I've seen happen in the 30 years that I've lived in Salt Lake, is that there's been this just really slow progress at Pioneer Park, and things like the farmers market. I see more activity at the park than I used to. I see less illicit activity at the park than I used to, but it didn't happen in a day or a month or even a year. But this seems like a step in the right direction towards making it a more of a community park. So yeah, I would say overall I like it, even though it can't be perfect, and it isn't perfect, but it's a step in the right direction. That's what I would say.
Would anyone like to make a motion?
I guess I'm just going to say it. I always get what's the name of the park that's 7th East? The one that's
Liberty.
That one is 100 acres or close to 100 acres.
Big, yeah.
It's just under 100 acres.
It's 8 blocks.
And so there's a lot of there's a lot of permanent structures, to your point, that are there, and there's always something to do that's varied. This at 10 acres is trying to do the same thing on a much, much, much smaller scale. And I'll go back to my statement that if the city manages it, I think this can be quite successful. But it's really got to take a commitment that the city will do that. What's before us this evening is, have the architects responded to what they were asked to do, and I think they have. Mm-hmm. To be fair to the park, when the arborist presented to us a couple of years or so ago, she talked about the history of this park, and this park has always been changing. It should be renamed Evolution Park, because there's always something happening that's different. I mean, there was just nothing but grass and trees. Then there was ballparks. Then there was a swimming pool. Then there was soccer fields. So I have to hand it to the city that they're trying to bring that life to the city by trying different things. And quite frankly, I think that's what the city ought to be doing. And I think that there's elements here, if it's managed properly, again, then I think it'll stick. Otherwise, yes, we'll be here, 10 years from now saying, okay, now we're going to do whatever is hot then. So, but I think we should bring this to a close. There's some issues. Is it perfect? I don't think it is. But I think what the architects have done has responded to what they were asked to do. And I think they have responded to what we asked them to do on the Ranger building and on the restroom building. So I think maybe we bring this to a close and we make motions or we don't make motions, but I think it's time to do that.
I'll make a motion unless there's anything else.
Great.
Okay. I will make the motion that based on the information presented and discussion, I move that the commission approve these major alteration application as recommended by staff.
I will second that.
So
There's 2 major alterations, so there would need to be 2.
2 votes, 2 motions. Okay.
Could we make one motion to approve both of these major alterations? Okay.
Yeah, as it's listed in the staff report.
Yeah, I'll restate the motion then. I'll make a motion that based on the information presented and discussion, I move that the commission approve both major alteration requests as recommended by staff and detailed in the staff report.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion from Jared and a second from Amanda. Let's run down the line.
Can I make a friendly amendment to the motion? That we delegate final construction details to staff and final artwork location and details to staff. Okay.
think that's great, and that's how it's in the motion sheet. Should I restate it one more time, or should?
I think when you said as it was listed, I think that encompassed both of those conditions, so I think we're okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. Let's vote. Babs? No. I'm a yes. Mike?
Aye.
Adrian?
Aye.
Amanda?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Emily?
No.
Jared?
Aye.
Alan? Okay, the motion passes 7-2. Thank you, everybody, for your work.
Can't wait to see you all down at the splash pad.
I'll be there.
Do we need a break?
I couldn't be more
Yeah,
mad.
we're gonna
Have a little
take
pickleball.
5
Take 5? Okay,
for
good.
a
That's great.
break.
Thank you.